So I wanted to make a little video explaining basically my life story and the events that brought me to Christ, which was 20 years ago this month. I'm making this video in October of 2015. So it was October of 1995. I don't remember the exact day. I wish I did, but I just know it was October that my life changed completely for the better. It was literally a road to Damascus experience. From one day to the next, I was a changed person. And I'll get more into that in a minute, but I want to try and keep the chronology straight. Whenever I tell my testimony, usually I get it all jumbled up and how the chronology went. So I'll start, from my early childhood. I know, well, when I was a baby, supposedly I was Christian Catholic, which is a joke to me now. I'm as much anti-Catholic as you could be. When I was young, my dad, when my parents divorced when I was about 7, but before that, my dad was going to a Baptist church, and he probably took us occasionally. I don't really remember going too much with him, but I know he became very much into reading the Bible, and I know he always had his Bible in his hand, but I didn't attend to the Baptist church with him too much. But after him and my mom divorced, I went to live with my mom, of course, and she became affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which she took me there pretty regularly. It was a good experience. As a child, I got exposure to keeping the Sabbath, and so that was good. Today, there's not too much I agree with the Seventh-day Adventists about, other than the Sabbath, but that's another story. So, like I said, she attended very regularly to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and she even got me to, I think it was my uncle who would sponsor me. My uncle was one that discovered the Sabbath and taught her about it. So she started keeping the Sabbath and attending the Adventist church. And my uncle, I believe it was him, at least partially sponsored me to go to a Seventh-day Adventist school, which I did for 2 years, and that was wonderful. I have great memories there. I had some great friends, schoolmates I met there, and there were some really good people. So I went there for about 2 years. That would have been 6th to 7th grade, I believe. Yeah, 6th to 7th grade I went there. And like I said, it was great. We had chapel every day, and then on Fridays they would let you off half day. We get off like 1 p.m. I think, and then I used to take the city bus home. Well, I take it both ways, and so it would take me about an hour, probably more, each way back and forth to school. So my mom at the time was babysitting my baby cousin, David, who was a wonderful boy. That boy was something else. I could still see him in the backyard, and he'd come in consistently with rocks. He liked to put little rocks in his mouth, but a couple times he put a snail in his mouth. He came in, and my mom found with a snail in his mouth. So anyway, she'd babysit him every day, but every Friday she would have her hair done. So she needed to have me home earlier so I could babysit and she can go get her hair done. And being that it took me so long to get home, and being that I got off early on Fridays, and being that I take the city bus home, so it'd take me longer to get home, she would have her longtime boyfriend, fiance, come pick me up. So it was one Friday I got off, and the principal, he stopped me outside, and he said, your dad called me. That's what he told me. He said, your dad called me and told me to have you wait here. So that was all he said, so I was gonna. He just kind of walked away. He was gonna have me. He told me just to wait there for my dad. I didn't say nothing to him, but I was confused because I thought that maybe my mom's boyfriend, he called and said he was going to come pick me up, which didn't make no sense because it was a given. I knew that every Friday my mom's boyfriend would be there to pick me up. Or B, my dad was going to pick me up, but that didn't make sense either because I don't know why my dad would pick me up when I didn't know. So I waited there for a few minutes. I seen my mom's boyfriend out there in his car, so I walked out there, and I told him what the principal said, and he didn't know nothing about it. So just to make sure my dad didn't show up, we stayed around for a few minutes, and my dad didn't show up, so we took off. And like I said, in the city bus, it took me about an hour to get home. With my mom's boyfriend, it took maybe 20 minutes, if that. So we got home, and we could get nowhere near my house because there were police, reporters, and just people milling everywhere around the house because earlier that morning, my mother, my brother, my baby cousin David, my brother Jason, my baby cousin David that my mom was babysitting, and a friend of my mom's. They all had been victims of one of the worst serial killers, probably the worst serial killer in California, and pretty significant one nationwide. It was certainly a statewide story and definitely a nationwide story. It was pretty bad. That's not even the word that could describe what he did especially to my mom. I don't know how much detail I really wanted to go into. I'm perfectly comfortable speaking about the details. I don't know who's going to watch this video. If they're young children watching it, I don't necessarily want to go into a lot of details. You guys can easily Google my last name, Miroth, M-I-R-O-T-H, and it should be one of the top hits on Google. If you put in my mom's name, which is Evelyn, it'll definitely be the top hit. Evelyn Miroth, M-I-R-O-T-H. You'll definitely come up with it. I heard there's a Jewish tradition that says, which I firmly believe in, that if you refuse to pronounce a person's name, it is erasing that person, and it's like wiping them out, and it's a severe insult if you refuse to pronounce the name, which of course brings to mind the change in the actual appearance of the Tetragrammaton in the scripture. Another story, but my point is that for years I talked about the guy a lot, and I was more than comfortable speaking his name. When I heard a story about not pronouncing the name, and it's akin to putting a curse on a name, I decided I will never say his name again. Google my name, and you can find it. And if you're interested, you can read all about it. There's plenty of information on the line on the internet. I would suggest Wikipedia, or there's a few other sites, but there's some that are kind of play fast and loose with the facts. Wikipedia, I read the Wikipedia article, and it's pretty accurate. But be warned, it's some pretty gruesome stuff what happened to my family. So after that, me and my sister, well, my sister was already living with my dad, but I went to live with my dad. Him and mom had been divorced for about 5 years at this time. Went to live with him. Never really got any counseling. Never got no counseling whatsoever, really. And my dad was in his own, he was grieving the loss of his son and his ex-wife. I'm sure, even though they were divorced, he still had some kind of feelings for her. What exactly the extent of that was, I don't know, but either way, he was certainly grieving the loss of his son in a horrific way. He didn't really reach out to me as much as he should have. I was pretty much left on my own, and I think I just went into a state of shock, which I probably stayed in for 15, 17 years, something like that. Not sure if I ever really came out of it. I think just instantly I just like clammed up, held everything in, and that's the way it went. Didn't hardly shed a tear. When my mom died, I don't know if I did at all, really. I know there was one picture that got put on the newspaper, or it might have been on TV too, of me at the funeral. And I was just like with my dad and my sister, and I was just staring off into space, just like in a daze. So, went to live with my dad. Got into quite a bit of, well, it started off slowly, of course, as far as drugs. When I got into probably 8th grade, would have been my first exposure. Well, a little bit earlier than that, actually, but for all intents and purposes, 8th grade, certainly by high school, I was smoking pot pretty much daily. That's all I really did with pot until after high school. Then after that, all bets were off. I was doing, soon after high school, I did meth for the first time. Started doing that pretty heavy. I know I had been doing meth pretty heavy for a year or two, and I found out a couple of my friends that I was hanging out with that they were shooting up. They were doing it intravenously, and I was appalled. Like, man, you guys are nuts. You're crazy. I don't want nothing to do with you guys anymore. You're crazy. Well, wasn't more than a year after that I was right there with them. I started shooting it up, doing meth, and then at first I thought I was smart as one could be, shooting up dope. I was extremely careful, and I thought I knew what I was doing, and did that quite a while. I went in the military when I was 18, and then did not. Oh wait, no, it was after the military. Yeah, it was after the military that I first did it intravenously. Yeah, so during the military, my drug use continued. I did acid several times, and whatever. Mostly during the military, was mostly drinking a lot, but quite a bit of marijuana, quite a bit of acid. Not so much meth. Meth was before and after in the Army. But so after I got out of the Army, started these people I were hanging around with. I found out they were shooting it up, and decided to give it a shot, and liked it a little bit too much, unfortunately. Looking back, I can't believe how stupid I was. Like I said, I thought I was doing it smart, but there was no smart way to do it. Started being quite a bit sloppy about the way I was doing it. So, fast forward, I was extremely depressed. I had another little tragic incident when my daughter was born, and don't want to get into that too much right now, but suffice to say, my ex did something to me that was in many ways worse than what happened to my mom. She did a little legal wrangling and cut off all visitations with my daughter for several years. I kind of got out of sequence there because, well, I did mention when I had my daughter, of course, she was the love of my life. My first daughter was born, Stephanie, when I was 24. She was born in 1989, excuse me. And she was the love of my life for the first 2 years, and then she got, just overnight, I lost all visitations with her, lost all contact with her for several years. And I was already, like I mentioned earlier, I was kind of in a state of shock for my mom. I didn't, at the time, I didn't realize it, but I think, looking back, I think it was. And then when I lost visitation with my daughter, that just destroyed me. Looking back, I know the Father was there with me the whole time, and he was taking care of me, and he knew the depth that I would need to fall to in order to understand and recognize my need for him and submit to him. So I became extremely depressed, not really actively suicidal, but not having much will to live. I did kind of haphazardly attempt suicide a couple times, but not very efficiently, obviously, which was a good thing. But just extremely depressed, and not necessarily wanting to kill myself, but certainly not wanting to live. So, like I said, 20 years ago this month, which would have been October 95, I was staying in these apartments, extremely depressed, not working, not doing nothing but getting up, have a cup of coffee, and then about noon I start smoking weed from the moment I wake up, pretty much. Noon, I'd probably start drinking, and go from there. And that was the extent of my days, pretty much. And so there was a neighbor of mine, and he was a big boy. He wasn't real tall, but he was muscular built. And he told me later that for 3 days he kept feeling the Spirit tell him to go talk to me and to tell me about the gospel. And he resisted. He said for 3 days he kept feeling the Spirit tell him to go talk to me. And he told me later, he said, I didn't want to because I figured that you would take a swing at me. That's what he told me. And I told him, I said, dude, you're a big boy, man. I wouldn't have took a swing at you. So he said, so after 3 days, he couldn't stand it no more. He went and talked to me, and I surprised the heck out of him, because obviously the Father kind of knows what is going on, and he knows me, and he knows everybody a little bit better than we know ourselves. He knew I was at my ropes end, and I was at the perfect place to accept him. And that's exactly what happened. Like I said, my neighbor, he got surprised when he came, and just even the very brief retelling of the gospel, and I was ready. And I said, yes, I want to accept Christ, and I want to go to church with you. And he invited me to church with him. Well, he invited me to church with him, but I think before that, he invited me up to his apartment, and we said the quote-unquote sinner's prayer. And there and then, that day, that very moment, I said a sinner's prayer, and I meant it. And it was a Pentecostal church he was going to, and I went with him for quite a while. But I can't begin to stress that it was literally a road to Damascus experience. From one day to the next, I absolutely felt a changed heart, a changed life, and changed outlook. The depression went away. Everything was just great. Other people may not have seen it in me outwardly. Maybe I didn't show a huge change. I've never been one to be real eager to go speak of the gospel. I love when I have the opportunity to, but inside, I absolutely felt the dramatic change in me. I quit the drugs right away. Well, I quit the meth right away. I admit I kept smoking pot for probably a year after that. Quit drinking right away. I quit drinking, I quit the meth. I kept smoking pot for quite a while, but I quit that eventually, and then quit smoking cigarettes about a year after that. So that's basically the gist of it. October 95, that was the time for me. My life got changed. And kind of an interesting side note, side note, on, well, probably about 2003, 2004, somewhere around there, when I'd been attending that Pentecostal church for maybe 6 months, and I realized that they were wonderful people. They were great. They really showed me the introductory parts of Christianity. They walked me through. They showed me love like you wouldn't believe. The guy that was my neighbor, he was right there for me. He was a great source of support. His name was Herman. Have no idea where he's at today, but I constantly pray for him to this day. And if anybody would care to say a prayer for Herman N, please do. And the pastor, well, the assistant music pastor at that church, his name was Prentice, and he's since passed away, I know, but I also would ask for prayer for whatever type of ministry he left behind. I know he had a music ministry that was wonderful, and he lived out the gospel. That man was amazing. Granted, he was a little misguided as far as the Torah and whatnot, but to show and to live the gospel, that man was just amazing. So if you'd offer up some prayers for Herman and Prentice, you would be a big blessing to me. But so went to the Pentecostal church for about 6 months. Started remembering the Sabbath like we're commanded, and I already had some familiarity with it from my time in the Adventist church. So I left, joined the Church of God Seventh Day for many years. But like I said, about 03, a member of the Church of God, well, when my mom died, my baby cousin David, his mom, my aunt, which was my aunt by marriage actually, and they got divorced before David died, but I've always considered her more my aunt than my uncle. I'm closer to her actually. She was going to the Church of God Seventh Day, so there was some connection there. So I heard a story about 03 that the night my mom died, they're having a memorial, probably mostly for David, but my mom too. And there was a young pastor there, and he was praying, and I got told a story, in 03, when this event happened it would have been 1978. He was praying, and he said he prayed for the family that suffered this tragedy, and quote, especially that little boy left behind. And I started bawling when I heard that story, because like I said, it was about 03. I got saved in 95. The prayer was said in 1978. So it's that 17 years later that prayer got answered. Well, the exact prayer was that he prays for the salvation of that little boy left behind. And I heard that story, and I just, wow, I was blown away. And it took me a little work, but I had to track down that pastor, and he had since left the Church of God, but he had the independent ministry in Idaho. And it took me a little work, but I got a hold of him. I called him up. I said, man, you don't know who I am, and I told him who I am, and I said, you prayed for me 17, well, this would have been 19 years, something like that. No, more than that. Anyways, I told him, you prayed for my salvation, and it took 17 years for that prayer to get answered, but it got answered, and I just want to tell you thank you. And he was probably not as blown away as I was when I first heard the story, but he was pretty appreciative for me taking the time to tell him. So it was a double blessing. So basically that's my story, and here I am today. By the grace of God, I stand here and just am a living testimony of how good God can be, and how he can lift anybody's life up from the dirt and from the depth of just the worst of the worst is who I am. And except for the grace of God, I don't know. I don't have a doubt that I would be dead today if I kept going like I was. But out of the depth of God's love, he looked down. He seen me. I don't know why he cared about me. I was nothing. I was far from him. I was doing things that I'm completely ashamed of. But his love for us is beyond our ability to understand. And I just love him so much. And Father, I just thank you for this opportunity to tell the story. And I just pray that you would bless even one person through this, that they would be moved, and that they would just draw closer to you through it. And I thank you. And I thank you so much for Prentice and for Herman, Father. And just ask you, wherever Herman is today, that you would bless them. And I thank you for the ministry that Prentice gave to me. And I thank you, and I lift my hands to you in praise and honor for what you've done to me, with me, through your son Yeshua. And I don't understand it, but I thank you. And thank you for the time that you guys have taken to watch this. And I just am humbled when I think about what God has done for me. Adios.